The softest thing in the universe overcomes the hardest thing in the universe. Hence, I know the value of non-action. Teaching without words and work without doing are understood by very few. Great accomplishment seems imperfect, yet it does not outlive its usefulness. Great fullness seems empty, yet cannot be exhausted. Great straightness seems twisted. Great intelligence seems stupid. Great eloquence seems awkward. The reason why I kind of wanted to bring these principles is to help empaths find peace in the things that they're going to have to go through in life, because like these are all metaphysical inner processes that we have to go through. And I think when you have a mental and an emotional framework and on what's going to happen and how to deal with them, it's going to help make, like, I know for me, even though I still have to go through the inner pains of doing shadow work and things like that, like I have the intellect to know that I'm going through a process. So it's not all in vain. And when the seven hermetic principles, or what some people just call universal law, is as tangible to you as some injustice that's happening in the world, when those things that you cannot see are as real as the things you can see, then you can begin to put faith back in your own inner emotional world, put faith back in your soul, put faith back in God, and find some inner peace, which I think we all strive for. Yeah,
for sure.
For questions, comments, and to show your support, visit us on the web at afroempath.com. So how have you been since we last talked?
Actually been doing good, at the human level. There's human things going on, so I'm up and down in that. But in terms of like my knowing and, still going forward and not regressing, that's very good. And you?
Just been doing a lot of shadow work, man. I realized that, like, as empaths, like a lot of the shit we deal with never even came from us. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
So I'm having to deal with the darkness within other people that couldn't handle their own spiritual weight, and so they put it upon me to deal with. You know what I'm trying to say? So
yeah. Have you ever heard of something called relational disorder or relational illness?
What's that?
Well, you know how in society they're constantly giving new labels and terms to things that just sometimes they don't even need a label. It's just understanding. But anyway, it's basically what we go through as empaths, is what you just said. It's when you're in relation with, whether it's family, whether people you work with, go to school with, whatever, and you pick up all of their baggage, all of their energy, all of the stuff that drains you. And what happens is that it's not yours, but it makes you sick.
Yep.
So that's why they call it disorder or illness, but relational, because it's not yours, but you're an empath. So it's a part of your work. So when you're not awakened, it weighs you down and you don't know how to come out of it, versus when you're awakened, then you know how to set your boundaries and be like, look, I gotta go,
Exactly. Yeah. That's a hard thing for us as empaths to, number one, realize we're empaths and realize that, like, so, take the time to sift out who you really are outside of the energy that you've been stuck up under through the karmic, like responsibility that you came here to do for, from clearing up, so many, like, I just call them demons of your bloodline. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh yeah.
So let me ask you this: you listen to that podcast, The Body of Christ, Ascension, and the Role of Empaths. What do you think about that? Because we spoke about actually a lot of that in that podcast. What do you think about that? I'm curious to know, because a lot of people, I think they see the title of The Body of Christ. So this is going to be some Christian, stuff, and this is not, I'm spiritual now. I gave all that shit up. So what do you think about that?
I really appreciated that episode that you put out. I thought that it was very informative. I can't say I remember every single aspect of it, but I remember there's parts of it that stuck out for me in terms of, it's like, and in a case, so then it brings into what I feel the role of an empath is that what it reflected in the episode and what I feel an empath does is similar to things I've already mentioned on my channel about placebo effects and animals that are used for therapy and Reiki and all of those things. So what I gather is that depending on, because there's different kinds of empaths is what I'm understanding. So what I understand is that in the seen and the unseen, when you are among people, places, and things, you are capable of speaking, bringing language, clarity to what is not being understood on either side. So you can act as a mediator. And then if we want to use some of the terms like Judith Orloff put in her book about being a plant empath or an earth empath and so on, or an animal empath, then we understand that when we see on television or wherever, you have people say that they can speak to animals. You might have people in society say, well, he's a liar, that you can't speak to an animal. However, when you observe animals, you understand that they're in a communication, and those that are open to it, or those that the animal has chosen, you see that they're having a communication that not everybody is able to be receptive to. So I feel that the role of an empath in the world is that if they're awakened, if they were able to grow in the knowledge of who they are the ones that are able to hold the space for the darkest things, or things that are perceived to be bad or ugly or painful. We're capable of that, and we're also capable of shifting that energy and replacing that energy with something that is better feeling, better serving, bringing some understanding where there isn't.
Correct. And for me, like, I use the example of, Christ in the Bible, or the body of Christ, as kind of the basis of that. I'm trying to say, basically, that story is the story of just that. Someone who goes and who suffers for the things that people didn't deal with. I'm trying to say, they say Christ is exorciser of demons, right?
Yeah.
So he's suffering for a nation of people that put off their problems. They call him the lamb, because his people were a people that would slaughter animals for their sins. You know what I'm trying to say? So because they put all of their work out, all of their inner emotional work outside of themselves and did it externally through animals, he had to come and do it and be the sacrifice through his heart. You know what I'm trying to say? And so that's why I use that example. So now I want to kind of take that and kind of jump into this, like, it's not a philosophy that I necessarily made up, but it's I came from the Moorish Science Temple of America, and they are, you think a lot of people think of Moors, they think of Muslims, and I guess they are Muslims, but the first day I went to the temple, they said, the brother told me, he's like, we're Muslims who believe in Christ, so just to give you that, understanding of where I came from in terms of my philosophy. And so, let me pull this up here. So basically, this is my thing here. And I'm going to say it, and you can stop me anytime and ask questions, but I want to run this by you and see what you think of it, because this for me is like, it's my like inner emotional compass, and I think it's helped me on my journey as an empath, and I'm hoping that it can help other people on their journey. But the only part that I made up that I didn't learn from, like, either the Moorish Science Temple of America or the Kabbalion was this part, which is knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. But that really is something I took from the story of Christ. I just kind of condensed it. I'm trying to say, because in the story of Christ, number one, there's the knowledge phase, and this is again, using the term body of Christ. This is something that we all do as empaths. You know what I'm trying to say?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Before
Go ahead.
So just so that the perspective of the viewer, I don't know if everyone's necessarily a visual person, but I would think most empaths are visual, because when you're picking up on things that are unseen, there's some kind of visual that we get, or some kind of representation. So anyway, what I want to understand, or so the viewers can have an understanding, is when you, in your personal life, are reflecting on the Christ or the body of Christ. My question is, does Christ have a physical image? That's one. Two, if he does have a physical image, is it the typical one that we see? And three, is it your belief or your knowing or your philosophy and practice that this living entity lived as a man and walked the earth and did all of these things?
Gotcha. That's a beautiful question. So in the Moorish Science Temple of America, as I'm reading the lessons, because they have their own like little book, and it actually was kind of taken from this book called the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And basically, as I'm reading it, one of the brothers kind of looks at me and asks me, he's like, when you're reading this, what does it remind you of? And I said, or who does it remind you of? And I said, myself. Meaning that these are stories to help you on your journey throughout life. Now, I do believe there will be one man that is Christ, but I believe that even that man came to teach man its potential, right? So these were, I read it knowing that these were lessons for me to have on my path. And so I never looked outside of myself. These are principles that I use to on my own journey towards Christhood. Right. So yeah, if unfortunately us as Africans living in America, we've had through slavery, certain metaphysical whiplash marks that when we're thinking of Christ, we're thinking of obey master, obey master.
That's exactly right.
Stop being African. Be white. Be Christian.
That's
where
right.
Where that came from actually is when Europeans or white people say Christian, they're not saying like Christian, like we do unto others as we'd have do unto them, or into the golden rule, and Christian like we are followers of Christ. They're actually saying, because you gotta understand that you gotta understand history. So we are Moors, right? I went to the Moorish Science Temple of America. The Moors were expelled by the Christian powers who were European, right? So when they're saying, when George Bush is saying he's Christian, when Trump is saying he's Christian, what they're saying is they are part of the Christian powers who overthrew the Moors.
Okay.
I'm saying this is like, how in law they have like legalese.
Yes.
Well, in politics, they have kind of like a Muslim Christian East-West type of thing. When they're saying Christian, they don't mean the golden rule in Christ, because they're not following that. When they're saying Christian, what their meaning is, we are the powers who overthrew the Moors, who are actually the lost tribe of Israel, who are, the Moors are Israelites, So I'm just here to say that because, there needs to be kind of a distinction. Like if you don't understand, what happened to us during like the Inquisition, then you're not going to understand that the practices in America that happen today with racism are actually a continuation of Inquisition policies.
Yes, exactly.
So that needs to be said. So understand that, again, all religions came from us. That means that, the monotheism, I'm going to say it came from ancient Egypt, but it was definitely perfected in ancient Egypt. That turned into Judaism or the Hebrews, whatever, that became Christianity. Later on, that went into Islam as we brought that knowledge out to other peoples. You know what I'm trying to say? But all these things came from us. So don't disregard them because white people, we gave this knowledge to white people, we gave this knowledge to the whole world. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's all ours. So that's up to you to reclaim your power back and understanding your history and understanding how we thought when we had our minds and our hearts and our history intact. Now, into these principles here. So knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. So knowledge. So in the story of Christ, knowledge would be he's learning that his people were and being enslaved by an outside force in the Romans. You know what I'm trying to say? These are all things that are happening now, but the Bible was a story written then to tell us what we needed to do now. You know what I'm trying to say? And so knowledge, so that's the first part, knowledge. And for all of us that, we all went through a process of knowledge, trying to find the truth. I'm trying to say, like, what really is this world? Like, what, trying to sift through the lies and understand ourselves. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
So in the story of Christ, that knowledge brought him to action. He realized that, okay, like these people are enslaving us in our land, and he took action. He went through the temples, saying you're not practicing this right, and you're lying to people. And he flipped over the money changers tables, saying that you're manipulating people through changing the currency. You know what I'm trying to say? That action brought him pain. He was, labeled the king of the Jews and went through the crucifixion and things like that, the thorn of roses and all that stuff. That pain brought him introspection. That introspection would be when he was in the cave, with the rock over it,
Yeah.
After that and for us the introspection phase for us is just when we're doing our inner work, when we have to close ourselves off from the world to heal our hearts. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh yeah.
After then comes the wisdom when he became the Christ. He no longer was going to go back and do the things that he did with where he was doing all these kind of violent actions before, flipping over the money changers tables and running through temples with swords and things like that. Meaning that he through that process he was able to find faith in a new way of doing things, right? Because he understood that the kingdom that he was fighting for was not a kingdom necessarily on earth. So there's knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. I'm kind of calling this like 5-5-7-3. So that's just the way I remember it, because I like things that are easy to remember. So knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. That's the first part. And so the next part is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So like meaning that
back it up. So the first one is knowledge, action, and then
knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom.
Okay, go on.
So that right there was that's like to me that's like the story of Christ. And then the next part is love. Like I guess the next part is like the guiding principles of that. So love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So like I guess love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice are like the guiding principles of somebody who would take knowledge, action, and pain. Someone that would take action based upon that knowledge. So meaning that in the story of Christ, there were people also that were on the cross next to him. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that many people have suffered, not just people that were, I look at Christ as being the example of the greatest empath. So what separates somebody that suffers versus somebody that suffers, that has the potential to heal a nation? You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. And for me, that what it is purity of heart. You know what I'm trying to say? Because he took his action based upon those principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So like those, to me, those are like the seeds of God's kingdom that exist within our hearts. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. So for example, like, you cannot have, you speak a lot about harmony and how empaths are supposed to help bring harmony to the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so those principles, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, what I like to imagine as, for visual people is that like, imagine like, a pentacle or the Vitruvian Man, etc. And just think of those principles, across from each other in the shape of a pentacle, meaning you cannot have one without the other. So for example, in order for there to be peace, there has to be justice, right? In order for there to be justice, there has to be truth, right? In order for there to be truth, there has to be love, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. So those principles are what brings harmony and order into this world. Mm-hmm. Meaning that a lot of people experience, pain, again, in the story of Christ, there were people that were being crucified next to him. But what separates someone that is, what you may call a natural born empath, or someone that came to suffer on behalf of others, is the fact that they are striving for those principles, not just for themselves, but for especially for others as well. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to see his nation free. He cared more about his nation's freedom than his own well-being. He was willing to put his life, and put the life of others before himself. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's that selflessness that those principles of selflessness, striving for those principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, that are the guiding principles of the first five, which is the knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. And so then the next part is the 7 part, and those are the 7 Hermetic principles. Have you heard of those before?
Yes, I don't know them by heart, but I heard of them. Yeah. Okay,
well those are the principles. Those are the guiding principles that basically those are like the laws of the universe. So everything within the universe corresponds to those laws. Mm-hmm. And during the introspection phase, like that is through meditation, that those are the principles which you use via meditation to achieve the next 3 stages, which is belief, when you think you know, faith when you know, and fruition when you become what you know.
Mm.
So I'm not sure. Like, I didn't really explain the hermetic principles, but that's something that people have to kind of look into on their own. But basically, like for example, in we talk about inner work, right?
Yes.
And so the hermetic principles, when you begin to understand them, what it shows you is that there are, right now there's a big talk of science. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And how, like, I forget. I think it was Harrison Ford that got up there talking about, like, you shouldn't be able to be in politics if you don't believe in science or something like that.
Okay.
Well, I kind of took that, like, I was kind of taken back by that, like, because I it's a white guy saying, he's probably talking about, like, science as in give up God or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning that science of what you can see. Now, I came from the Moorish science temple, so the science that we talked about was the science of the inner, the heart. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
The sciences that you can't see, and the 7 hermetic principles are the sciences that you can't see but that you can feel.
Yes, I looked it up. So it says the first one is mentalism.
Mm-hmm.
The all is mind. The universe is mental.
Yes.
Second is correspondence. The principle, as above, so below, as below, so above.
Yes.
The third is the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The fourth is polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The fifth is gender. Gender is in everything, and it has its masculine and feminine. So gender manifests on all planes. The sixth is everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Cause and effect is the last and the 7th principle. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized, and there are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I love that. And, I love when we have these types of conversations with people who are like-minded, because just today, to the very first question that you asked me about what did I think of the title, with Christ being involved, I actually came across a channel today, and I don't want to invent a title, but I believe he goes by the name of the Sage something, and his channel is Celia Media. That's what I remember. Anyway, he's a Rasta man from Jamaica. However, he speaks on the Bible and Christ, and he says hallelujah and all of these things. Now, he also speaks to the 7 hermetic principles.
Yes.
And so this is what I mean to say, where I'm open to being able to receive and to hear, because I feel something in it for everyone. It doesn't mean that all of it has to be for you. And even in that lies in the 7 hermetic principles. So what I find, if I want to use one word to encapsulate the 7 hermetic principles, I would say that one word would be nature. I think that nature is a true embodiment of these 7 hermetic principles.
Correct. I mean, it embodies everything. Nature is the outer world. You know what I'm saying? But it embodies our inner world too. These are laws that everything has to correlate to. So it's boy, we could speak about just the 7 hermetic principles for forever, and that's like that is my passion. You know what I'm saying? So as you're reading these, I'm like sounding out the axioms because I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear you read them.
What I suggest you do, because this is what I intend to do on my channel, is that when a person asks, like, how could you have, what do you, like, if a person's thinking we're ever going to have topics to talk about on our chat, never. There's always something that you can relate back to having empathy, and there's always a way that it factors in, because we just discovered that in this empathetic principle. So if I were to suggest to you, because I know what I'm going to do, is I'd break them down, do an episode about each one, and you can have either different guests or however you want to do it, but just do an episode for each one, so then you're not limited to feel like you have to jam all the information.
No, I hear you.
Video.
Yeah, I've talked about the 700 principles, and I've covered everything that I'm talking about now. Like, I've covered in like little bits of different episodes, but I wanted to have one episode where I kind of talked about it all. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, yeah. So like this whole 5573 thing, like, for me, this is like my baseline. You know what I'm trying to say? We all have our baselines. I'm trying to say, for me, this is my baseline, and so I figured, you know what? Let me share this with people, because it may help other people, you know, to some degree. And so,
what is the 5573 aspect of it?
The that all it is just a way to remember all the principles. So basically, there's the 5 is, you know, knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. That's 5 principles.
Oh, I get it.
And then love, and then those principles have to be guided by a will to seek love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Right. Those you know, and then you know, during your introspection phase, you know, you're going to be, you need to I don't want to sound like a dictator here, but basically, in order to become an alchemist, you have to use these 7 hermetic principles via meditation, and then eventually you'll achieve 3 states of being, which is well, most people are path belief if you're listening to me, but which is that, I guess, is belief, faith, and fruition. But basically, I said it before, but I'll say it again. But like, meaning that, you know, this podcast is not about you know, my podcast is about teaching people how to become Christ-like themselves. You know what I'm trying to say? It's never been about taking power outside of anybody. You know what I'm trying to say? But with that said, the story of Christ is someone that goes around doing that. You know what I'm trying to say? He's goes around teaching people to, you know, God wants you to be like God. You know what I'm trying to say? Christ wants you to be more like God. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like a leader wants other leaders. You know what I'm trying to say? So like, yeah. So, but basically, like, you know, the knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom, like that first starts off as like a physical thing. So like the knowledge is first knowledge of the world. Like for me, that knowledge was like, 9/11, and, you know, like what happened, you know, with the, you know, the buildings being taken down, and the Pentagon, and, you know, what's going on with this war, you know, and, you know, I used to listen to like Alex Jones and stuff like that, you know, so like the knowledge begins with outer knowledge of the world, you know what I'm saying? And the action is first, you know, is outer action, meaning that you have to take your vessel and actually put your vessel in harm's way. You know, and that's going to bring you, you know, it could bring you emotional pain, but it, you know, in the story of Christ, it brought him physical pain too. I'm trying to say he went through a physical process, but also that physical process was to, you know, I kind of alluded to it on the last show we had, when I was talking about how I went through that process where I gave myself an exorcism. And I felt, you know, I was like kind of stuck there on the ground crying, and I felt these sharp pains in my hands and my feet. Well, that was going through that metaphysical process. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So like, so these are things that I speak about that I've gone through in my own life. You know what I'm trying to say? So, you know, so that I for me, it's like, you know, trying to get through the dogma of other people's minds based upon their experiences with Christianity, which I'd never had. I never went to a church. You know what I'm trying to say? So I don't know, when people have these kind of bad, like guilt-based, fear-based thoughts, I don't understand. I can understand them just being an empath, but it's not part of my inner working. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. That makes sense. So like but I try to be respectful of people based upon where they're at, you know, in their journey, you know? Exactly. And so it starts off as a physical thing, which will bring you sometimes even physical pain. But eventually, you know, I feel that this knowledge, action, pain, introspection, wisdom is something that we kind of repeat and keep going through. And eventually it'll become, instead of outer knowledge that we seek of the world, you know, trying to understand why things are the way they are. And, you know, as we pretty much all go through that, then it becomes inner knowledge, you know, in terms of, you know, why am I thinking this way? You know, I remember the first time I ever became introspective, like I had an introspective thought, and I first started meditating. It was, I used to take these long walks, and I would just begin to think to myself, like, why am I thinking this way? Like, meaning a cop car rolls by me, and I have, you know, I never have been arrested in my life. I don't have any, I never broke any laws. Why am I, as a black man, afraid of this cop car passing me? Mm-hmm. That then you know what I'm saying? Like those were like my first moments of introspection of why am I feeling this way? You know what I'm trying to say? I'm feeling this way because other people feel this way. You know what I'm trying to say? And we as black people, we are all empathic. You know what I'm trying to say? Right. We all feel the things that other people feel. You know what I'm trying to say?
But here's my question.
Yeah.
Even though you have never experienced it firsthand, but you do recognize, you can empathize, and as an empath, you feel it. My question is it because you applied the 5573 to your life that you're not in the place of being distracted or being held down by the dogma that is, you know, the history of Black people in the context of society itself? Because my question, why I ask you that, is this is the conversation that I tend to have sometimes with some people who are in a place where this is not exactly you, but it's like people who are at different frames or places of thought in their experience, where they feel they're here in their experience, they understand the context. However, they don't feel the need to descend into the context in order to relate. I don't know if I'm being clear, because it's
I see exactly what you're saying, but that it's not about descending, because the thing is that, you know what, we as Black people have lots of demons. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. And whether you like, I'm not trying to get anybody to believe what I believe. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, I know.
But that said, you know, my show is called Afro-Empath Ascension, and so what is Ascension? What, you know, is Ascension us living in this world for eternity? Because if it's not, then how exactly do we get out of this world? Is this world your home? If it's not, how do you get out of it? So to talk about Ascension and talk about metaphysics and to talking about the occult and not bring Christ into it means you're not really talking about it. You're just afraid. You know what I'm trying to say? It means you're just afraid. And a lot of Black people are afraid. Why? Because they have been living under the oppression of these Romans, these white people, and have taken on the demons of their slave masters and have become like the Gentiles that they were ruled up under. Right? And so they feel guilty, and they don't want to give up their attachment to this world and to the demons that they've latched onto.
So that would be your response to how some people might perceive their feelings or their stance or their integrity, whatever word a person wants to associate to that, in terms of their Black experience.
The story of Christ is a story of the Black experience, meaning.
Because what I want to establish is, you and I understand that, right?
Yeah.
But for the person who is still in the state, or is okay, because there could be different states.
They haven't worked out their trauma from slavery. You know what I'm trying to say? That's it.
No, this I understand. Yeah. You and I understand this, right? But I'm talking to the people who are listening, whether for the first time or they've been listening and they're attempting to sort out that, right?
Yes.
I want to know to you is, when you are speaking, even though you know what you know.
Yes.
When it's in relation, though, to other people, and you're having a conversation with them, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know what you know. They're not there yet, or we don't know if they're ever going to get there. But the point is, they're not where you are.
Yeah.
So my question is, in order for them to be able to hear your message, and again, it's not about you trying to get them to believe what you believe.
Correct.
It's about just hearing.
Yes.
Because you're speaking, they're here. So in order for them to hear you, in that relation, it's as though some people's, like you said, yes, it's the remnants of slavery, the trauma, all that residue, all of those things. And why I'm bringing this up is that I noticed that in everyday conversations where society wants to talk about the commercialism, the shiny trinkets of the world, they're at the surface. And so these kinds of conversations, it's almost as though it's painful for them to even have the conversation, but then it's not painful for them to talk about the trinkets of the world.
Correct.
So to get them to even be present in this kind of conversation, I look at it like people, when we're talking about our Black experience, and we know that the Christ conversation is an embodiment of who we are.
Yes.
The thing that can be the distraction is wherever that person is at in their life, because if they're not in a place of healing, if they're not in a place of introspection into
yes.
all the places that you mentioned, 5573,
yeah.
those could be the blocks. And that therein lies a distraction. So it's like, I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation, where that means it's up to the individual to do their due diligence and their work, that when they hear certain things, for them not to shut down.
It's for them not get triggered. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, not get triggered, because I have a group for empaths, and sometimes I've noticed that if I can't even mention, like, boy, I wanted to have a conversation about being spiritual, in the church or something like that. Just some kind of topic, and just the word church triggered some Black women to like, oh, this ain't the right group for me. I'm out of here. You know what I'm trying to say? Like it's to the point where, like, no, you are being fear-based. You know what I'm trying to say? At this point, now you're thinking you're spiritual, but you're being as fear-based as the fear-based Christian in the church right now.
Right.
Thinking that you are, above that. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So it's,
Sorry to interrupt you, but can I just say, I will say that I'm guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have to work on that, because what it is that I really am working on moving forward, and I've already been to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to churches. Okay, and I've been to different kinds of churches, and different Baptist, Christian, whatever the terms are. So, and then I grew up with it in my household, having to be forced as punishment to read the Bible and know things by heart, all kinds of different levels to it. So my thing for me is just, I have to learn that when I hear certain trigger words, as you've said, or things that trigger me, to not necessarily react in that way, like the young lady who just, okay, it's not for me and I'm out. I have to learn to be able to discern, and ask the question, because just because you say church, I am learning that I have to understand, okay, what's your definition of church? Because again, we all have these words, but we all have a different understanding. It's like this, the saying, or the survey, or whatever, the thing that they did, where they noticed that if there's a crime that happens, there could be a bunch of witnesses, but they all have a different version, a different account of what happened. Mm. So I think it's similar to this.
Yeah. And I understand that. And that's why, I don't come on here like some damn preacher. I'm talking about the metaphysics, the inner workings of life, and right. And how you take these. That's why I say knowledge, action, pain, introspection, wisdom. I typically, that means you don't have to even mention the word Christ. You know what I'm trying right. to say? You don't have to mention the Bible. You right. can just say knowledge. I'm saying I'm helping to break things down for people so they can take it out of that and get the meat, as you say, you know what I'm trying to say, out of the Bible. The story of Christ is the process of knowledge, action, pain, introspection, and wisdom. Right. Yeah. So that's the whole point. Meat out of compassion for people who do have these metaphysical whiplash marks of Bible thumping and guilt-based, fear-based programming from the church. Out of compassion for them, I'm breaking it down. Number one, I didn't come from that. But out of compassion for them, I'm trying to break it down in a way that they can still understand the processes that we all have to go through in our inner emotional world. Yeah. So go ahead.
You know what's interesting is that you said two things, church and trigger. And did you watch Killer Mike's Trigger Warning?
No.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is that he actually did like some, controversial stuff on this. I don't know what you want to call it, documentary, whatever he
Mm.
did, but it was that he had a part of it where he did his own version of church. He explored religion and spirituality, and yes, in the context of Black people, with similar types of thought about, challenging thought or challenging group thought. And so when you watch it, depending on which eye one is using, a person could, look at it and cast judgment and criticize what he did. Another person can look at it and be open-minded and say, okay, he's critically thinking, he's engaging in community and society's way of thinking outside of the box. And so that was one of the episodes in that thing that he put on Netflix.
So the seven hermetic principles, it says all truths about half truths, all paradoxes can be reconciled, right? That's polarity. So all truths about half truths. So that's what I like to think about. Like, in the ancient world, we never argued, right? Because we knew that truth has to be experienced. So that is where he's at in his journey, trying to understand life. Right now, he's making a documentary for other people to see based upon where he's at. Right. That's why, I think it's important to do inner work. Like before I got on here and it started running my mouth about, life and philosophy, I spent 10 years by myself, no sex, no friends, meditating in silence.
Yes.
Right. So you got to, I spoke about in the podcast about this guy, Umar Johnson, who's thinking he's going to save Black people by making schools or something like that, meaning there's the outer knowledge of the world. And on the surface, it seems good. I had the same mentality. I want to save Black people. You know what I'm saying? That seemed like a good thing until you realize that, okay, how do you save Black people?
Yes.
Can you go around and can you go around? Do you physically have the manpower to put a bottle in every baby's mouth?
No,
you can't do that. And unless you're going to build an army, which is what we would need for protection to keep those schools going. Because we had schools back in at certain times. And guess what? In Black Wall Street, those are bombed. Exactly. So unless you are going to create an army, you cannot do that. Right. Or actually you can do that if you listen to these principles and apply them to your life and illuminate your soul while you're on earth. And then there is nothing that you cannot do. Right. Yeah. And so in the Bible, it says, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Yeah. Right. So this work is about taking that little mustard seed, which is really just an analogy for your soul. Right. And bringing that online in the muck of humanity to be able to have your will, which is God's will, exacted.
Exactly.
So this is the most important thing ever that we're talking about. It's not going to be understood by very many, but again, truth has to be experienced. So I don't go around stressing about who understands it and who doesn't understand it. 90% of people don't understand life itself, and they're going around and preaching to people about it.
That's it.
So so yeah. The knowledge, action, pain, introspection, wisdom. So again, outer knowledge, and most people, I was at that stage, outer knowledge. You know what I'm trying to say? Now I was still humble enough to understand that I still had, how can I put it? I knew that I still needed more to know. You know what I'm trying to say? I knew that I hadn't had it figured out yet. You know what I'm trying to say? How did I know that? Because when you have things figured out, you'll be at peace.
Yeah.
Another word for peace is part of that three, which is faith, right? Faith is when you know. Faith is when you know. So it's easy to tell, when people have faith because they're centered. You know what I'm trying to say? And that's a process that we have to go through. But I knew I couldn't be professing to people when I was full of anxiety myself, because I did that for a while. Like I remember when I was in my revolutionary phase, I'd be like, we gotta, we're not out here going door to door and telling Black people their nationality. That was my big thing about telling Black people their nationality. You know what I'm trying to say? But people would just be like, all right, just kind of push me to the side, like that's a stage we have to go through. A lot of people get stuck there. And so they just they can never think outside of what their five senses are being shown to them. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
To understand that we're here going through a process as individuals, but as a collective.
Yeah.
So that knowledge actually, the inner part of that becomes, again, inner knowledge, and then inner action, which is, in my case, I use the 7 Hermetic principles. There's different teachings of how to do that. I know the Taoists, in the Taoist teachings, they have, similar philosophies of non-action. I was gonna read something from the Tao Te Ching. Let me pull it up here, because I think this is powerful, because it's like, all of these philosophies, they all kind of fall in line, to these same teachings. And really, realistically, all these teachings really came out of ancient Egypt. 1 second. Let me see if I can find it here.
Well, while you're looking for that, to touch on what you said about in terms of the 10 years that you spent in isolation and all of that, I believe and feel that is actually intrinsic to certain empaths, that it's what we end up doing. Because I've been on the journey of speaking with empaths, 9 out of the 10 times I've had a conversation with them, man or woman, there's some period of time, whether it was 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years or more, that they've spent in isolation. And whatever term you want to label it, they just recognize it's not that they don't have attraction and want to do certain things. They just realize they have a greater work to do, and this work is going to get done without distraction and within their introspection. So I can relate to that aspect.
Yeah, perfect. And this goes right into this Tao Te Ching verse. I'm going to read this real quick. So the Tao Te Ching, it says, this is chapter 43 to 45. The softest thing in the universe overcomes the hardest thing in the universe. That which without substance can enter where there is no room. Hence, I know the value of non-action. Teaching without words and work without doing are understood by very few. Fame or self, which matters more? Self or wealth, which is more precious? Gain or loss, which is more painful? He who is attached to things will suffer much. He who saves will suffer heavy loss. A content man is never disappointed. He who knows when to stop does not find himself in trouble. He will forever be safe. Great accomplishment seems imperfect, yet it does not outlive its usefulness. Great fullness seems empty, yet cannot be exhausted. Great straightness seems twisted. Great intelligence seems stupid. Great eloquence seems awkward. Movement overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Stillness and tranquility sets things in order in the universe. So I don't know. I had to feel like I had to say that. Like,
yeah. So it was in perfect alignment.
Yeah, like this work's been going on for so long and in so many different places throughout the earth. You're gonna say it's so gorgeous to just finally bring it home. I'm trying and bring it back to we were the light of the world that brought this knowledge to the rest of the world. And so for us to kind of come back to it is just so gorgeous. It is. The last part I want to talk about with, that whole, because I kind of talked about how the knowledge, action, pain, introspection becomes inner knowledge, inner action, or as the Taoists would call it, just non-action, or as we would call it, inner work. I wanted to talk about what are rights, because a lot of what is the catalyst for our striving to know? I'm trying to say our striving for knowledge in the first place that even brings us the willingness to want to take action and to experience that pain, to become introspective enough to find wisdom, is our rights or other people's rights being violated. Our rights have been violated for a long time, but the importance of that and the metaphysics of that. So I wrote here, what are rights? And basically, rights are rites of passage for your physical vessel to come into this world and live free and unmolested. When those rights are violated, your ability or inability to invoke the seed of God within you will determine your spiritual potential in this life. With that said, without a violation of those rights, we would never have a test to know our own strength and to know our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
without, yeah, so, or I should say, if going by the whole 5573 thing, like, you know, a test of your faith also is also going to be able to catapult you into fruition. You know what I'm saying? So it's part of that process. So yeah, I feel like that was a good thing to say for empaths, because injustice. Speaking about the Hermetic principles, everything has its opposites. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
And that pole, that one principle called rhythm. It says the swing to the left to the pendulum to the left is a swing to the pendulum to the right. You know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say? So
Yeah.
meaning that to the degree that your rights were violated, you know what I'm trying to say, can also be to the degree that you have the power to exact that justice. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you see all these superhero movies, the superhero terms, it's like the Avengers or the Justice League, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm saying that that's all us. All these superheroes, that's all us. That's all us. You know what I'm saying? So like, I don't know. To me, that's just some cool stuff, like that. But that's what we're here to do. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, we have to go through certain processes, certain metaphysical processes. You know what I'm trying to say? Where our rights are violated, where our physical vessels are molested, and our freedoms are challenged, to invoke as catalysts to invoke the seed of God within us. You know what I'm trying to say? So I think like the reason why I kind of wanted to bring these principles is to help empaths find peace in the things that they're going to have to go through in life, because like these are all metaphysical inner processes that we have to go through. And I think when you have a mental and an emotional framework and on what's going to happen and how to deal with them, it's going to help make, like, I know for me, it's helped, even though I still have to go through the inner pains of doing shadow work and things like that, like I have the intellect to know that I'm going through a process, you know what I'm trying to say? So it's not all in vain. And when the seven hermetic principles, or what some people just call universal law, is as tangible to you as, the guy that got shot, on the TV, or, some injustice that's happening in the world, when those things that you cannot see are as real as the things you can see, then you can begin to put faith back in your own inner emotional world, put faith back in your soul, put faith back in God, and find some inner peace, which I think we all strive for. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Like, I don't know, whatever you want, whatever you want to speak about or comment about, from there is, I'm open to it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you did a very good job of uh, illustrating your 5573, and I intend that the listeners are able to, and those who are really, I don't want to classify and say, well, you're not serious if you don't do it this way, because
Mm.
we all have our way to come to understandings. But
Yes.
it's like we just want to reiterate, it's not about speaking to everyone who does not understand. And it's like I feel like the commonality that I experience on this journey is that when a person speaks, and everything that we just heard through the 5573 and with the seven hermetic principles is, if the vibration, the rhythm, if all of that is corresponding, then you're able to open and hear. But if you're shut down and you're not receptive, then you're not, it's going to go over your head. So yeah, I think this is something that if a person is able to be open to, they can apply it to their lives. And it's so reflective for me that in my own life, I won't say that I'm going to pick up this exact 5573 and say that I'm going to use it exact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
I know that it makes sense, and I feel that in its essence, I'm doing it in my own way, or
Correct.
through my own experience, and
Yeah.
I just know it had a name, similar to us being empaths. And until somebody said, "Oh, you guys are empaths," you didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's similar to that. So, and I recognize the 5573 in African cosmology. Why? Because, like you said, it is African cosmology.
Correct.
It is Black people. It is Blackness.